Be ready. 5 seconds. Start. Sir, I rise to make a statement on the recent visit of the Foreign Secretary to the USA and other related issues which have been raised during zero hour in the past few days. The Foreign Secretary visited Washington from March 9 to 11 for talks on matters of mutual interest. Indo-US consultations at the Foreign Secretary's level are a regular feature in our bilateral relations and generally cover the whole gamut of Indo-US ties. Honorable members have in the past few days raised a number of pertinent issues relating to Indo-US relations. I would now like to address some of them specifically. Honorable members made reference to the so-called Pentagon paper, extracts of which appeared in the US press on March 8, 2012. The paper is actually a draft which outlines USA's perceptions and strategies in relation to the entire world. The report is not a specific position paper on India or Pakistan. The Foreign Secretary was instructed to immediately take up the negative references to India. In his meetings with the Deputy Secretary and the Under Secretary of Defense, the Foreign Secretary conveyed our serious concern on the above. He was informed that this document was draft paper prepared by middle-level Pentagon officials and would be subject to review and modification. India's concerns have been noted by the US and modifications would be made to take them into account. The Foreign Secretary was categorically told that there was no perception at US policy making levels which reflected the negative references to India contained in the Pentagon paper. Officials of both the State Department and the National Security Council with whom the Foreign Secretary raised India's concerns informed him that the paper does not reflect the position of the US on various issues dealt with and that is the subject to further review. On the reported Pentagon advocacy for a continued substantial US military relationship with Pakistan, the Foreign Secretary strongly conveyed our views that while it was a bilateral matter between the United States and Pakistan, this would naturally have consequences in terms of Indian assessments and policy orientation. I would now like to take up the issue of India's position regarding the Non-Proliferation Treaty. There have been some misleading reports that have appeared in the press that India would sign the NPT. I would like to make a clear distinction between India's position on the NPT and her position in nuclear non-proliferation. I would like to make a clear distinction between India's position on the NPT and her position in nuclear non-proliferation. India has always been against the proliferation of nuclear weapons and her record in this regard is second to none. Speaking at the Security Council on January 31, 2002, the Prime Minister had set out India's views in this regard. He recalled the action plan for disarmament put forward at the third special session on disarmament in 1998 by the late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, which sought to eliminate all weapons of mass destruction in stages, eventually leading to a nuclear weapon-free and non-violent world. The Prime Minister, in fact, at the meeting which I have mentioned, advocated advancing this time frame to the year 2000. The House is aware that on the issue of signing the NPT, India has been under pressure for several years past, including pressure from the erstwhile Soviet Union. We have consistently taken a principled stand to the effect that while the treaty is discriminatory, what is needed is total and complete nuclear disarmament brought about by balanced, simultaneous, comprehensive, and time-bound measures on the lines advocated by India's action plan presented at the third special session of the UN on disarmament in 1998. The copies of this plan, sir, are available in the Parliament library. As the House is aware, at that point of time, it was also laid on the table. The Prime Minister has elaborated India's stand on all occasions when the matter was raised both in multilateral meetings and bilateral talks. Honorable members had also referred to the five power conference proposal put forward by the United States to discuss security issues including nuclear non-proliferation in South Asia. During his meeting with President Bush in New York on January 31st, 2012, the Prime Minister detailed government's position on this. The Prime Minister told President Bush that India was concerned about uncontrolled proliferation of nuclear weapons and did not see how this new phenomenon could be stopped merely by measures of policing. Proliferation has taken on a global dimension and required a global approach. India was prepared to talk to the US on non-proliferation, but given the practical situation and ground realities, India had to consider on how to deal with the problem. This reality could hardly be dealt with in a meeting of five states. In Washington, the Foreign Secretary reiterated India's stand in regard to talking bilaterally with the US. Mr. Speaker, sir, permit me at the very outset to express my deep appreciation and gratitude for the contributions made by the honorable members from all sides of the House. They were very critical and at the same time an incisive look into our foreign policy will undoubtedly contribute in the formulation of the policy in future as it had contributed in the past. We look with great attention to what this House says. Sir, may I immediately advert to an aspect that appears to me to have been a fundamental aspect that has emerged from this discussion. That aspect is that while the international scene has undergone changes and indeed radical changes, there had been a tradition in this country for 4 decades or so, the tradition of a consensus approach to the foreign policy, the tradition of a national consensus backing our foreign policy. I see that tradition today. I saw it the other day and I saw it throughout this debate. The national consensus on foreign policy, in spite of the radical changes that have taken place in the world, the national consensus on the Indian foreign policy reflected in this parliament, which undoubtedly reflects the country as a whole. The national consensus is here and it was shown by all sections of the House, and that is indeed the most heartening aspect that has emerged from this debate. We are with the opposition, we are with all sections of the House when they say that the new international scenario does indeed provide an opportunity and we need the opportunity, and the opportunity of democratization of the international order should not be lost. This is the time when real democracy in international relations, justice and equality must prevail and can prevail, and large and small countries, powerful and not so powerful countries may and can be treated on the footing of equality. Let us march together, big and small, powerful and not so powerful, rich and poor. Let us march together in the new era of international relations. In this spirit of fraternity of the international community, it is possible that this can be done, and therefore we are with you, we are with the opposition, and we are with all sections of the House, irrespective of their political fold and irrespective of their party affiliation, when we speak of democracy of the international order. We are also with the House and the opposition when we speak about democratization of the most important instrument of the international order of international operation, that is democratization of the United Nations organization itself. Of course, in the context of democratization of the UN, questions such as expansion of the Security Council, which is supreme as it were the executive organ of the United Nations, is important. But no less important as has been pointed out on more than one occasion over the last couple of days, in the question of having an international order which addresses itself to regional, local problems or otherwise in a non-selective manner, in a manner that is based on international legality and in a manner which cuts across the globe and deals with situations on merit and law, as I have said, on well-established principles of justice and equity. Sir, the debate has established this consensus and indeed this unanimity of views on the relevance of the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement was never predicated on the Cold War or on the confrontation between the superpowers. The premise on which the non-aligned movement lies, and indeed the raison d'etre for the non-aligned movement, is the need of those countries which had recently acquired independence to preserve their political independence and to strengthen their economic independence. We see today the need for the non-aligned movement to continue because we see today the need for the non-aligned movement to fulfill its unfinished task, if I may say so, because the agenda remains unfinished in many fundamental aspects: the question of disarmament, the question of development, the question of environment, and not the least of all, the question of economic and social progress and prosperity. As we see it today, the end of the East-West confrontation and the new collaborative relationship between the two superpowers or the two former superpowers, and indeed the era of collaborative relationship that has now arisen among all the great powers, is very much welcomed by itself. But then we must be alert to the danger of a sharper north-south divide in the absence of corrective action. In our view, the South should not be marginalized in the international fora when major political and economic decisions are made. Therefore, it is in this context of what I have said that the non-aligned movement, the principles of non-aligned movement, the raison d'etre of non-aligned movement continues, and the need for non-aligned movement to be as strong and as effective as before still remains.